Welcome to the show, Mind Matters, the podcast on love, life, and learning. Today we're going over an episode of AFSCs 1 through 9. Today we got Lieutenant Robert Dabbs in the house, Public Affairs. Can you start us off by telling us what your AFSC is?
Yeah, hi, I'm Robert Dabbs. I go by Hunter, that's my middle name, and I'm a First Lieutenant Public Affairs Officer, so 35P.
35P. Is that the official title?
Public Affairs Officer or 35P?
Public Affairs Officer.
Yeah, Public Affairs Officer, so you've got multiple different job titles that fall into each of the functional areas. For me, I'm the Chief of Media Operations.
Oh, awesome. That's great. Great stuff. How did you find PA?
Yeah. So PA is a really interesting career field because it's pretty much the most not military career you can have. It's kind of like a liaison between the military world and the real world. And when I realized that there were combat photographers is actually what got me into it. I had a passion for photography growing up. When I realized you could do that for the military, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And yeah.
So does that mean you knew you were going to be PA from a little kid? They're like, oh, I want to be a vet. I want to be a doctor. You were like, I want to be PA.
No, I actually didn't know I wanted to join the military until the end of my junior year of college. I started school as a studio art major with a focus in photography. It wasn't really going anywhere for me, and I couldn't afford college anymore. I was going to drop out and enlist, and because I wanted to be a combat photographer, and everybody that I know that's military or friends of military said, don't enlist if you're going to do it, be an officer. And so I started researching, found out about ROTC, transferred up to the University of South Carolina so I could start the Air Force ROTC program up there. And once I was there, I did have my mindset on PA.
That's awesome. That rolls us right into the next part. Tell us your origin story. What's your background?
Yeah, so I, as I just said, like I've always had a passion for photography. My dad kind of grew us up around some cameras, and always taking pictures and not just like happy snaps, but he was always trying to teach us like the fundamentals of photography, shutter speed, f-stop, ISO, that kind of stuff. And when I was in high school, I really enjoyed my photography classes. So that's what got me into being a studio art major with a focus in photography. But then from there, I kind of found like this liberal arts, this little tiny piece of liberal arts that's actually in the military. And that's what I started chasing.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. It's funny. My wife does photography as well. And it's funny how it's kind of a whole nother language. She's like aperture and ISO, and like I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
I was like, can you explain it to me? Like I'm 5. I've tried to learn a little bit, but yeah, it's really good stuff. Tell us one lesson you've learned that you think everyone should learn in life.
Let's start off with the military lesson. I would say the biggest thing that I've taken from my civilian life and put into the military world is my background in food service. I grew up working in kitchens, grew up working in restaurants, and I've always been a strong supporter of everybody should work something in the food service industry or the service industry at all, just so that you can understand what it's like to take care of people, especially taking care of people that don't necessarily have any desire to be taking care of you. That positivity goes a long way, and just taking care of people. Yeah.
Oh, that's good stuff. I think there's some things you really can't learn until you live it. You can try to read it in a book or whatnot, but until you've worked something and had someone come in 10 minutes before closing and try and get a full meal and get that feeling on the other side. Yeah. That's pretty tough.
I was just talking to somebody about that recently. Like we were going back and forth because one of my buddies, he also grew up in food service, same kind of thing. And sometimes we'll meet people and we'll go back and forth and like, yeah, like that guy would definitely show up like right as the restaurant's closing and ask for stuff and then be a pain and that kind of thing.
You can judge people based on your prior experience.
Right.
That's good stuff. So we're going to move over to the warm-up. So in all sports, you got to warm up, get the bullpen ready, get the muscles going. So we'll get into a little bit of a warm-up. So we got a few questions for you and a few questions for me. First one for you. Can you give us an overall overview of your career field and the types of jobs or positions that fall within it?
Yeah, so public affairs is broken up into three primary functional areas. First of all, you've got command information. That's going to be all of your commander's priorities, vision, mission statement, that kind of stuff. And how do you communicate that to the required stakeholders? That's going to be through, social media, that kind of stuff, as well as like base wide emails, basically getting the word out of there. That also kind of captures all of the visual information stuff that we do, the photo, the video, the media arts. Every time we take a picture, we're really trying to connect that to a commander's intent. Why does that picture matter to what the commander wants, right? One of our commander's priorities here is taking care of airmen and their families. When we send somebody out to a retirement ceremony, often it's the retirement ceremonies are events that people don't normally want to shoot, but because they're just repetitious and a little boring sometimes. But why does taking that picture matter to the boss? And it falls under that, taking care of our people, taking care of airmen, that sort of thing. Another thing that we focus on is delivering that decisive air power down here. So when we're out there on the flight line shooting the multitude of aircraft that are here right now, how does that portray that message? The next functional area is community engagement. So that's going to be all of your local civic leaders, local government, and local community type stuff, community outreach events. We got to build relationships with those people so that when stuff does go wrong, they can come to us versus the opposite, which is just complaining. And building those relationships really helps us kind of live more harmoniously. Overseas, especially here, there's not necessarily the same type of appreciation for the military that you would get stateside. And so having those community engagement events and building those relationships kind of help us live a more comfortable life over here. And then the last section, which is the section that I'm the chief of right now, is media operations. And that's going to be your traditional news media, right? So local media, Ryukyu Shimpo is out here, NHK, Okinawa Times. We handle all of their media queries anytime they want to get on base to do an interview or do a tour or understand more about what's going on, or anytime they have a really serious question, they come to us and we field that. We also handle all of the U.S. national media that'll come through as well. Just recently I had a mission with the P-8 Poseidon, the naval intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft. We had CNN, NBC come down. We threw them on a P-8 and they flew over the South China Sea, and they got intercepted by a Chinese fighter jet, and it was national headlines, and we put them on that plane. So that's also part of what we do.
So out of the three sections, some career fields have kind of like a hierarchy or different things. Is there one that you normally start at, or is it kind of whichever one you're given at the current time?
Yeah. So on the enlisted side, most people start in CI. The tech school for the enlisted guys is primarily focused on it's a little bit of everything, but capturing photo, video, and is their primary focus. So when they get here, most of the shooters, most of the guys on the ground with the camera, that's going to be your lower enlisted guys. As you get more senior, you'll move into those community engagement and media operations roles. Because it takes a little bit more experience and a little bit more understanding of how the Air Force works and how to really communicate those commanders and the commander's intent to more highbrow people, not necessarily just putting them up on Facebook, but sitting in that local assembly meeting and still being able to get those messages across.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would assume the ones that being that close to the commander and things like that, you probably need to have a little more time.
Right, and PA is a really weird career field in that sense where we actually fall under WSA, the Wing Staff Agency. And so administratively, we fall under the Comptroller Squadron, but we're really on a daily basis interacting with the command team. And my last 2 EPRs were signed by 1-stars, and like that's what's as a second lieutenant. So it's a wild opportunity for a younger person, especially like fresh out of college, fresh in the Air Force. Not really common.
Yeah, that's wild. Just straight to the top right off the bat.
Yeah.
What are some things about your job that most people don't understand?
Most people think it is just taking pictures, right? So, you've got your St. Patrick's Day 5K, or you've got some other local MWR community event. They're like, hey, can PA be there to take pictures? And sometimes we can. Sometimes that does fall into what we need to be covering. But a lot of times we're getting these HHQs from PACAF to shoot some more intense, serious stuff, and it's not necessarily just taking pictures all the time.
That makes sense. You got to get that 833 in?
The 833, yeah, that is the Air Force form that you have to submit in order to get to get photo coverage for that. That's right.
I've done a Projo event or two.
Oh yeah, we're dealing with loads of young CGO Projos that just want to get somebody to take a picture of their event. That's right.
Oh boy. Okay, next one. What are some aspects of your job you enjoy?
I love everything about my job. Being the chief of media operations it was super intimidating when I was coming over here. But now I love it. Like I just sat down today and yesterday. We're doing a series of local media tours. We're inviting local reporters, newscasters, journalists on base, like Japanese nationals. They sit down in our office and in the conference room. We give them a mission brief in Japanese. They ask me some questions. I've got an MLC that's translating for me, and we get them answered, and then we give them a tour around the base. And it's an awesome opportunity to meet people, right? There's thousands of service members over here, and not all of them, most of them probably don't actually interact with the local community. And this is like an insane opportunity for me to get to meet these people and build these relationships. And then when there is a problem, they call me directly and they ask me versus the opposite.
That's good. Yeah, you definitely have to establish relationships before you need them. I remember I was an emergency manager, and so we'd exchange business cards and stuff between the different hospitals and whatnot. You don't want to find out who the emergency manager is from a nearby hospital when things are going really terrible. You'd like to know before then. So kind of building up that Rolodex before you need it. Well, those are the warm-up questions I have for you. What do you have for me?
So I see you got an exec badge on your blouse over there. What were you doing before you were an exec?
So I've done quite a few things. So I was air traffic for 5 years, contracting for 3 years, enlisted. And then I was lucky enough to get picked up for my commission for the Medical Service Corps.
Okay.
So I'm MSC, which is basically 6 or 7 different AFSCs jammed into one. So it's all the backside of the hospital. So I love helping people. I don't do blood or needles. I pass out. So this is a sweet opportunity to help people without having to hit the deck. So we do the money, the manpower, the equipment, the supplies, the entire backside business side of the hospital.
So for support for the med group.
Yeah, so it's kind of like Noah's Ark. We have one of everything. So if there's a line side function or non-medical portion of it, then we have one in-house. So for example, we have RMO, Resource Management Office. That's our version of finance. And they run all the budget and everything because medical money is very specifically different than regular line side money. So there's different rules and things we have from DHA. So yeah, so by trade, I was a medical logistics. So logistician, anything that comes in the clinic that gets bought in any form or fashion goes through logistics. So that includes housekeeping, maintenance staff, all the contracts, and then all the supplies that come through. So pharmaceuticals, narcotics, all those things. So any dollar that's spent within the med group is funneled through medical logistics.
So were you trained as a loggy, or were you trained by the med group to be a loggy?
So most of our job, for the most part, is on the job training. So we do have what's called a follow on, and we have that back at Fort Sam Houston. And those are 2-week courses, and they're little appetizers, little tasters of kind of what you do, but in 2 weeks it's not enough to really grasp everything.
Right.
But they'll show you kind of how to manage the flight at that management level. So reports to run, things to keep an eye on, inspections, checklists, things to monitor from that level. But it's not enough to like know everything. And one thing that's a little difficult, which I think in most jobs, is every clinic is so different. So you could be at a small clinic that has like 100 people, or you can be at Travis, which has 4 floors, 5 in some areas, 4 wings, thousands of people. So every clinic is so different, even though they're all doing healthcare. They're just so different. Like most clinics, you do blood pressure and weight, nothing really that crazy. But then at your Eglins and Travis's and San Antonio, you have surgery and, really overnight stays and things that are more critical. So it really changes. And that's one thing that's difficult. I've helped people commission and come in and they're like, what do I read? And what do I do? And I'm like, kind of pause and wait for a little bit, because it's really contingent on where you are. Like overseas versus stateside, completely different. So like one thing that's big for us is patient travel. So when people have to go and get in-place medical care for mental health or whatever the issue may be, that's really difficult out here. Obviously, we're on an island by ourselves, and so we have to figure out plane tickets and someone to go with them and a bunch of things that go along with that. Stateside, there's like clinics, you just check them into the clinic downtown, drop them off, and you pick them up in a month or whatever their treatment plan it calls for. So there's just some really different things between stateside, overseas, and then the large and the small hospitals.
Yeah, when I think about the med group, right, like I'm thinking, especially on the O side, I'm thinking about doctors. You know what I mean? I'm thinking about guys that went to med school and now they came in as a captain, and they don't really do the Air Force. They just kind of do the medical, and they wear the uniform, but that's about it. But I also just met another individual recently who is kind of on that back end support for the med group, but wore the med patch right there. And, so you didn't go to school for anything medical related, did you? Or
No. So our program looks for management type degrees. So you could have a degree, like my degree is a business admin with a concentration in contracts.
Gotcha.
And so I think sometimes, I don't think it's ever written per se, but sometimes I get pulled to logistics because contracts is under logistics. So I understand budgets and colors of money and appropriations and things like that. So you get to play to your strengths. But that is one thing that's odd about our career field. Like you don't get a new AFSC, you just keep moving every 18 to 24 months. And so that throws a lot of people off, because move over to readiness and they're like, wait, did you get a new job? No, same job. I just got to support a different part of the right. clinic. So it's really interesting. And that's really what drew me in. I remember my first day I shadowed. I was like, this is a thing I have to do. I get stagnant, I get bored. And so having a new job or something completely functionally different every 2 years is really cool to me.
Yeah, I'd hear that. I can't do the same thing for more than 4 years either. Like, I've never held a job for more than 4 years before. Like, I'm super intimidated to get to that 3-year mark because it feels like I've never done anything for 3 years before. It's I hear that. I'm constantly changing, and it kind of works out for us too, right? Because before I was just a public affairs officer, I kind of supported other roles, but here now I can focus in on the media section and do that kind of stuff. But my little brother actually just commissioned last year. He graduated from Clemson, the Clemson ROTC program, and he's a contracting officer over there at Peterson Air Force Base.
Oh, nice.
Peterson Space Force Base. And they got the coolest patches. He's got like a Hydra on one arm. It's nuts. Yeah. But yeah, he doesn't really know anything about contracting, knows a little bit about finance from college, and they just kind of threw him in there. So,
yeah, we do a lot of on-the-job training, and I think we do a really good job as a core of helping each other out and whatnot. I've always asked for documents or best practices or whatever it may be, and I've never been turned down. Stuff shows up in my inbox, ready to go. So I think we do a good job.
How long did you spend in San Antonio? Just a couple weeks?
So initially, your first tech school is 6 weeks. So you do 4 weeks of general MSc, so it's just kind of across the board on how the med group works and functions. And then, like I mentioned, that 2-week course, you go to like your focused one into your functional area for your first one. But it's kind of funny. Sometimes it ends up lining up with the one that you go into, and then sometimes the needs of the Air Force, they need something different. So you'd go for group practice manager, and then you end up in medical readiness, so they don't even relate. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't get to the follow-on courses because we're overseas or something, but we're set up to be more problem solvers for the most part. It's like, can you work through network, liaison with other people and get stuff done? So we don't need as much of the functional expertise because we have flight chiefs and enlisted and other people that can help us through that process.
Yeah, I think the way to make yourself the most valuable asset as a CGO is to know people, is to know who to call, have the hookups, have the lines with people, and yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I think the biggest part of that is making sure you reciprocate, because I've seen some people, they ask and ask and ask, but I always like hesitate, and I always try to remember, like, I hope I help this person, or as soon as they do call, I'll be ready to help. And you don't want to like ask for something and not give something. So usually I'll send the product that I'm working on. This is what I have. I don't like it, but could you help me? Or have you seen something better? But try not to come empty-handed or like reviewing bullets for other people. Well, I guess we went to performance statements now, reviewing packages back and forth, or, putting something in kind of your bank account so you can pull on it later.
Right. I asked about San Antonio because that's where I was stationed first. So the public affairs first assignment's only 2 years. Oh. So I hung out in San Antonio long enough to put on first lieutenant, and I came out here. But
San Antonio was a good time.
Love that town. Love the city. And you know it just from going through school there, but probably the largest service member community, VA and active duty, got to be in the world. I know it's the largest installation in the Department of Defense. And it's not just Fort Sam, right? You've got Lackland and Randolph that all fall under the 502nd. So it is absolutely insane out there, and it's busy all the time. It's busy all the time out here too, but I feel like I'm taking a breather from San Antonio by coming out here.
That's surprising. This place is crazy. But I have heard some wild things about the medical wing out there.
It's a wing.
Yeah.
It's a wing. It's not a group.
I think they have 6 group commanders just at the med group.
Yeah.
That's insane. So let's dive more into your AFSC. So what does an average day look like for you? I'm sure it's kind of tough. Every day looks different, but can you walk us through and get us off the Google version that someone would look up?
Yeah, definitely hit it on the head right there by saying every day looks different, right? The biggest thing that we do, probably the most consistent part about my job, is putting out random fires, right? So, I was just on call last week. I get a phone call when somebody gets a DUI, which is super easy to do out here because the BAC is 0.03 versus 0.08. I get a phone call when a Marine punches another Marine in the face outside of gate 2.
Which happens a lot.
Which happens kind of a lot. And yeah, it's crazy. There's my normal workflow is running through emails and coordinating the next big thing, the next event, the next engagement. But I love that because I get the opportunity to fly sometimes. I get the opportunity to go on these tours. I can meet these other people. I do Air Force things on other installations. Just recently, a couple weeks ago, probably a couple months ago now, went up with the 33rd guys in an HH-60. We had to document the exercise that they were doing, COPE Angel, which is a bilateral rescue mission where JASDF, Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, and United States Air Force, PJs, rescue people. And so they dropped myself, a captain who was like the person in distress, and an IDMT, a individually deployable medical technician, off on an island off the coast of Okinawa. And we hung out for a few hours while the helicopters were looking for us. And then they came down, threw them on a stretcher, took them up, and then that was the end of the exercise. It was wild. And, I love that part of my job, right? I can kind of go up and shoot and take photos of anything at any time. But obviously I do have some fun admin, sit in the office, work on email type stuff as well.
That's good stuff. So you had to break down your day, an average day, quote unquote, which isn't really a thing. What would you say it looks like? Like 30% admin, 30% scheduling, and something else?
Yeah, I would definitely say 30% admin, right? I got to clear out that inbox, and that's either looking at requests or reviewing documents. We do a lot of. I just had a lieutenant colonel send me a research paper from the med group. Actually, send me a research paper. He's like an entomologist as well, and he did some. He did some research on mosquitoes on Okinawa, whether or not they're carrying Japanese encephalitis, and he referenced the Air Force a few times, and he referenced the Marine Corps a few times because he did some research on those installations and captured mosquitoes there. So we've got to review those documents to make sure that there's no kind of the Air Force endorses this research by blah blah blah, right? So and that's not necessarily the admin stuff, but that's another thing that we do. So that can take up a few hours in a day. And as a CGO, right, a lot of it is also interacting with the airmen. We've got about 24 photographers, videographers, graphic artists. We used to be split up by that specific discipline, but now they've kind of merged all of the enlisted career fields into one. The 3 ends, and they're supposed to be able to know how to do all that stuff. So helping them understand that kind of stuff. And I fortunately have a background in creating media content, and I can kind of help them out. And then when I go shoot too, they also give me some feedback. So that's super cool.
That's awesome. So there's about 24 and then just a couple more over the different sections. You get about 25 or so within.
So all of our enlisted guys, they all kind of cover down on that CI portion. Some of them help us out on the other side, but them in conjunction with our MLCs, we kind of, evenly split up, I would say, the workload for all the sections.
So you kind of highlighted a really cool opportunity there with the helicopter and Pack Angel, but I wanted to give you another opportunity. Is there any other things from your job you'd like to highlight?
I got plenty of them. It's nuts. I get to do cool stuff all the time. When I was in San Antonio, we had an air show at Randolph. It was, something like 500 or 600,000 people over the course of the weekend, but they called me a week before, on like Tuesday or Wednesday, and they said, "Hey, we're going to take C5. There's 433rd, which is a airlift wing down there at Lackland. They've got C5s. They said, hey, we're going to take a C5 up to Fort Hood and pick up an M1 Abrams and a Bradley and bring them down as static displays for the air show. Do you want to go?" And I was like, heck yeah. So I jumped on a C5 with the vice commander, and we made some Instagram videos so he could promote the air show, and I got to watch them really do their job. The biggest thing that the air wings do is deliver ground forces, right? And or the most mission centric thing that they do is deliver those ground forces and deliver ground assets. And watching a tank getting blown up into an airplane is pretty freaking cool.
That's awesome. Those heavy C5s are just massive. I remember at Travis, they'd bring them out for static displays every once in a while, and you can throw a football down. That's crazy. Crazy to think that you could fit 2 tanks in anything.
Right.
That's insane. I did have one question, kind of side topic, but I love cars, and I've seen some people
with the wagon down there. I think sweet.
Shoot some pretty cool rollers. So it makes me think, how do you shoot an aircraft flying around like a jet? Like, that seems insane. They're going so fast. How do you dial that in? You got any tips for amateur photographers?
Yeah. So we actually are really fortunate out here with the 909th because that's the air refueling squadron out here. And one of the things that we get to shoot most often is aerial refueling. And with these temporary deployments out here, the 22s, 35s, 16s, we get to shoot them flying right up behind the KC-135s, the tankers, and get in their face, and it's incredible. The shots are insane. I've as a tip, I don't know. I think when something is moving, you want it to look like it's moving. You want a little bit of motion blur. The best rollers shots that I see of cars are shot between like 1/50th and like 1/125th on the shutter speed side of things, and that'll catch the car still as long as your car is moving the same speed as the one that you're shooting. It'll catch the car in place, but all of the background will be blurry and the wheels that are spinning will be blurry. And so it kind of captures that motion. The biggest faux pas for us shooting aircraft, especially helicopters, is helicopters that look like they're floating in the air. You got to shoot at a slow enough shutter speed so that you can see the rotors actually getting some motion blur, or else it just looks like a floating helicopter, and you want to see that it is flying.
Yeah, that would be kind of creepy. I remember I was up for a calendar contest, and so we took some pictures, but the car was it was moving, but you couldn't tell it was moving, so my wife did some Photoshop and tried to motion blur it.
Yeah.
But it was funny. Everyone was calling out like, "Oh, how come you can't see it in the wheels and the reflection in the windows?" And
no, the biggest punch in the face was when when iPhones came out with portrait mode, because it was basically fake wider apertures. So to get that like shallow depth of field, you need a wider aperture. You need to be shooting like a 1.8, 2.8, 3.5, that kind of thing. But what iPhones were doing was basically using AI to pick out what was the subject and blurring everything else. And it wasn't perfect, right? You could still see the gap in the arm where it was still in focus in the back, and it really shouldn't have been. So everybody became a professional photographer when they got portrait mode, but the people that really care about it can tell when it's not an actual shallow depth of field.
Wow, that's interesting. I thought it actually was blurring it correctly. Huh.
If you zoom in, you'll see on some portrait mode photos.
Interesting. Well, you highlighted that you love your career field, which is super awesome. I'm glad you found something you love, but I want to make sure all the listeners are getting a good complete picture of the jobs that are out there if they're looking for cross-training, commissioning, whatever it may be. So what are some things about your job that are less desirable?
The coolest part of my jobs are when I get to go see people doing ops, people that work in the ops group, right? People that wear the pickle suits. You always see them and you're like, dang, like maybe I could be doing that, right? And I know I could actually. Before I had a public affairs position, like a line position or a line number, I had an ABM slot. So PA is really what I wanted to be doing, which is why I gave up the ABM slot. But yeah, I got a bunch of buddies that I commission with that fly airplanes, or they sit in the back of airplanes on a more regular basis. And I guess the only thing that I don't like about my job is that I'm not doing that every day. You know what I mean? But I think I like my job better because I know there's a lot of not fun stuff that they have to do. And I would get over the fun stuff pretty quick if I was doing it all the time.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think the pilots get roped into a lot of admin, execy, and other things where they really just want to be flying planes.
Every pilot has 6 other jobs, and they always talk about that 6 hours of briefing and debriefing for every hour of flight, and I'm good on that.
Good stuff. Well, you highlighted some really cool stuff with Pack Angel, like I had mentioned, but are there other unique opportunities for like certifications or training or other things? I know our job, we got board certifications, some other stuff. Is there like cool training opportunities?
We don't necessarily have stuff like that. There's not a lot of like certs that you can get that would apply on the outside for us. There is one program that happens at Syracuse, and you can get basically to put on a reserve status and go to Syracuse and get a journalism degree or like a photojournalism degree. Very selective program. Not a lot of people that actually get to go do that. And you know, they make you pay for it on the back end. You got to sign that extra long service commitment afterwards. I think especially on the O side, the opportunity for just real life job experience to interact with big actual media companies. There's two jobs that I really want. Actually, one is the ELO, the Entertainment Liaison Office in Los Angeles. When they want to put airplanes on the Transformers movie, they go through them. And then we've got the big media outreach that falls under the SAF PA in Manhattan. And whenever we got to put a general on NBC for the morning news, they work through the media outreach office up in Manhattan, and it's an opportunity to really professionally network and have an insane job resume for if you want to get out and you want to get back into that field.
How's the process go for that? Just knowing the right people?
Sure you apply for it just like every other job. You put it on your dream sheet. Knowing the right people definitely helps out a lot. I don't know because I don't have that job yet. I put in for it before I came here, but it's usually like a senior captain that goes, and a second lieutenant putting on first lieutenant was not really an ideal choice for that job. So we'll see. I'll try again, but
out of here, this is the one. The next one's going to be it for you.
That would be pretty sweet.
We'll put some positive vibes out into the air.
I like it.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting out in your career?
It's kind of impossible to pretend like you know what you're doing at my job. It's very obvious when you don't know what you're doing. So just being, and how did you commission? You went to OCS, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard that most ROTC cadets that commission, they get a pretty good dose of this, but to like boldly claim your ignorance, look for your NCOs, understand that you're not the expert, and know who is. So I think coming out fresh out of school, coming into PA, like I had to learn so much about the Air Force so fast. And if I kind of ignored the Air Force side of things, it would not have worked out for me the way that it's working out for me right now.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I remember I was prior enlisted, and I was super thankful and glad that I was, because I remember becoming an MSC. I graduated from tech school, and I had like 20 blue folders handed to me, and they were all the appointment letters that were now my name on there, and I'm an expert in all these different things.
Right.
And so much job learning, but I was so thankful for at least knowing where the portal's at and how to put in leave and how to write a bullet and things like that. I had a coworker, she's a professional softball player, amazing person. She was able to learn all that functional stuff and learn all the other stuff along the way. And I just remember looking at her and like not even being able to imagine. She's like, "Where do I get the forms from?" I'm like, "EPUBs." She's like looking
What's
at
that?
me and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh no." So I was glad I was able to slightly focus, even though it felt like drinking from a fire hose. At least I only had to focus on that one aspect versus the other. But attaching to a senior NCO is always super important. That's one thing I really wish I could have done better. I was at a pretty small clinic, so a lot of the senior NCOs got pulled into the superintendent slot, so they were attached to the commanders. And so there wasn't as many senior NCOs as we would have liked, but that's definitely a good piece of feedback, trying to get that squared away.
Yeah, I feel like if I wanted to cross train, I could cross train into any career field, because I have now I understand how the Air Force works a little bit more, and I know how to get on EPUBs and look at my VMPF and do all of these things. And if I was trying to go to like a more strenuous training program, without having any of that knowledge, it would have been insane.
Oh, would have been real rough. What is one, not one, but what's one of the most important personality traits or strengths someone needs to be successful in your industry?
I think networking is the most valuable asset in public affairs, because not only are you being that liaison between the civilian world and the military world, but like for me right now, when I get these media queries, people ask questions about everything. And I've got to know who belongs to the med group, who belongs to FSS, who belongs to mission support group, who belongs to ops that can answer that question for me and allow me to accurately answer that question. And then I have to tie like a command priority to that, right? So we got this, a lot of F-15s returning back to the United States, the C&D Eagles. They're getting a little bit too old. to fly out here, and we've got temporary deployments of newer and more advanced aircraft coming out, and making sure that there's no gap in that fighter coverage. But I have to know, hey, this person just came, or this unit just came. I need to call them to get an answer about that aircraft. And then I also have to tie it back to, ensuring that it's free and open Indo-Pacific, and maintaining regional stability and security on top of that answer that I get from that person.
Yeah, that's a good point. It kind of reminds me of being an exec. I get these random questions in the front office, and I don't know everything about the med group, but throughout the med group, I know the overall structure and organization. And so I can be like, oh, that's public health, and that sounds like a bio question, and that sounds like flight med or wherever it is. So I can get you there. I don't know all the answers, but knowing who sits where and kind of what they do is really how I get through the day, because I don't know everything about flight med or taking care of patients and whatnot, but I know kind of what everyone does. So that's a good point. You got to know who does what at a minimum, at least, to be able to work through some of those things.
Yeah, I've always been known as a jack of all trades, but definitely a master of none, right? Like, I'm not great at anything, but I'm super okay at a bunch of stuff. And that kind of plays into like me learning a little bit about everybody's career field and kind of understanding what they do. I was on the golf course the other day, and I got paired up with these guys, and he said something about, oh, we're guinea pigs for engines, or we're guinea pigs for, he said something about being a guinea pig. And I said, oh, you work at the engine test facility. He was like, you're the first person that I've ever made that joke to and then connected it to working in the engine test facility. I was like, yeah, I heard it's like a really cool facility. Like, I want to go check it out. Last week, I ended up going over there, and I sat next to an F-16 engine that was at full afterburner from like a couple feet away indoors. And it was insane. But I got to do that just because I kind of built a quick relationship with that guy on the golf course, and it was awesome.
Oh, building relationships, taking care of people, you never know the things that can pay off. It's funny. We talk about like the honey versus vinegar or whatever phrase, but it's times like that when it really comes through, where you're just being a good person and building relationships pays off. So we're going to move on to our last question here. The overall topic or overall theme of the podcast is mental health, or mental fitness as we're calling it here. Continuously working on ourselves and talking about it, and kind of breaking the stigma of not being able to talk about mental fitness. It should be an ongoing issue. So we're going to weave these into every single episode. And so can you tell us a tip, trick, or personal story about mental fitness?
Yeah, my biggest way to combat mental fitness is, or combat any type of mental struggle, is having that support network around me. I built these professional relationships, but I also have a lot of personal relationships. A lot of people that I would consider mentors, in different aspects of my life, right? Like, I have people that I go to for financial advice. I have people that I go to for spiritual advice, for relationship, family advice, that kind of stuff. And having that network of that, like, really honestly, people that I would take a bullet for and people that I feel like would take a bullet for me, kind of makes me feel like I'm unstoppable, because I know that they're always going to be there to help me out.
One thing I've learned and really honed in the last couple of years, which I'm surprised it took me this long, but I remember in high school, I kind of knew everybody because I like to skate, so I hung out with those guys, and I swam, so I hung out with, people that like to do sports and AP classes and all these different stuff. So I knew everybody, but I didn't dive deep with anybody. And so when I left, I didn't really have any solid connections. So as I get older, I'm really trying to work on the quality over the quantity, because you can know a bunch of people, but I feel like that kind of hones in on what you're saying, like the people that are really important, that'll really be there if you pick up that phone and call. I think that's where that empowerment comes from. Like, you're feeling awesome, not because you know like 30 people or you have 1,000 people on your friends list on Facebook or whatever, but you got those 3 people that, no matter what time or what the issue would be, they'd be there. So that's a good one. Really honing in on the quality, making sure that people are really there for you.
Right. I got that crew that I know. These guys are going to be the groomsmen at my wedding. You know what I mean? Like that, those guys.
That's the perfect way to do it. Well, today we talked about public affairs. We talked about the good, the bad. It sounds like a really amazing career field. Seeing some stuff for engines on full blast and aerial refueling and lots of different stuff. If you're looking for something where every day is completely different, it sounds like definitely a good spot for you, or if you have a background in media and things like that. But I do want to give you one last chance to pass out some last words of wisdom.
My words of wisdom go back to food service. Every job is a customer service job. It doesn't matter if you're a maintainer. It doesn't matter if you're a pilot. It doesn't matter if you're working in public affairs, or if you're not in the military at all. The way that you treat people is going to make an incredibly huge difference on the way that on whether or not you enjoy your job. Big golden rule guy, right? Treat other people the way that you want to be treated. It really is that easy.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, I mean, if you are doing it for the right reasons, things will pay off, and people kind of feel like that doesn't pay off initially. But I think that sometimes it's the long haul. You don't know, and it's going to be down the road, and then you bump into that person again or whatnot. Then they're going to remember you helped them or did something.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think with Google and modern technology and things, we're getting closer to instant gratification. We want it now. And so sometimes if you don't get something instantly, it's like, why do it? But that's not the best practice. Definitely taking care of people for the right reasons. And I strongly believe in the universe being a powerful thing. It might not be tomorrow or next week, but it'll come back at some point, depending on how you treated people. So, well, thanks for listening to AFSCs 1 through 9. Remember, exploring different career fields is an important step in finding the right path for you. Join us next time as we continue to explore different career fields and the opportunities they offer. If you have any questions or want to share your own unique career story, please contact us. We'll see you next time.